Well, we have another call. We have lots of calls. I'm going to try to get through them, but we have another call where I want to juxtapose how Alex was answering our questions with how we're going to answer this question that our caller has. Luke from Canada is asking, how can you atheists be wrong? Turning the question on us. Okay. So I'm going to make sure that I understand that that's the right question. Luke, could you please confirm that that is the question? How can we be wrong?
That's correct. No,
excellent point.
How can you atheists be? That's correct.
So I'll kick it over to Jim. Jim, what would make you no longer be an atheist?
Well, I think the question is, how do we prove that our atheism at least appears to be true? And that is to examine all of the arguments that are for God. So we're looking at the teleological, the ontological, the cosmological arguments, the argument for morals. I'm missing several, I think.
There's a whole bunch, right? And there's just plain old experience and evidence and all of those sorts of things. And I will say the question is a little flawed when it says you're atheists. How can atheists be wrong? I think what you mean is what would convince you that there was a God, because it is true that Jim and I are not yet convinced that there are any gods. That can't be a right or wrong thing. Like, unless I'm lying, which I'm not, right? So I think what you mean is what would convince us that there was at least one God. And I agree that all of these things, Jim, you have to examine. Please go on.
Right. So, and I've looked at all those arguments and I have found them to fail. I have also looked at the most common definition of God in the Christian world, and maybe the Islamic world as well. And that is a God who is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent, and I find that God is logically impossible. And so I am left with, technically I am an agnostic. I don't necessarily make the negative claim, although I do for the tri-omni God that I just mentioned, omnibenevolent, omnipotent, and omniscient. That God cannot logically exist. So I am an atheist for that God. For every other God that it's like these arguments fail, but just because they fail doesn't mean that there isn't a God who is not a non-omni God. So that's where I land on that question. I examine these things, and I'm here on this show right now, as is the cross-examiner, to find somebody who can actually give us an argument that isn't one of these well-known arguments, and to actually prove it to us. So we are constantly examining in our cases, and not every atheist does this, nor do I think every atheist needs to be an atheist. So that's how we do it. Does that make sense?
Not quite. The question is, what would convince you? What I hear, and I understand you say, is something convincing. So what I mean by that is that all the arguments that you heard weren't convincing, therefore you weren't convinced, and what would convince you is something convincing. You don't know what, but you haven't heard it yet. Am I correct?
I would go a little further. I agree with that to some degree. Like I agree that the proper question is what would change my mind. I don't go to where Jim says that an agnostic is somebody who is not yet convinced, while an atheist is somebody who says there is no God. But that's a linguistic difference. We're on the same page. I'm not yet convinced, whatever the category that means. So what would convince me? My glib answer is what you just said, Luke, which I don't know. But then I also add, but all the gods that matter to people that have been proposed to me would know, and they would also have the power to convince me. They would have the power to produce some sort of evidence, create some sort of experience, or just simply change my mind or write it on my heart, or however you phrase it. So I don't know. It would sort of be like me asking you, what would convince you that there's a part of the universe where true can equal false? I don't know what convinced me of that, but if there is something that can make that happen, hopefully it can demonstrate that to me. What are your thoughts about that? I don't know, but all the models of God that have been presented me would know, and they have failed to do so far. Does that satisfy you? Okay. Do you understand my position?
I understand your position, but no, I'm not satisfied. I'm sorry. If someone were to say, I don't know, to the question, God exists, when you ask what will convince you that he doesn't exist, like the person in color, you would say, no, that's not enough. I need more. I need something like you presented with science, what science does. It tries the best to examine, to prove that they are wrong in their position, right? Mm-hmm. That's how scientists do. And this is not something that either of you are doing right now. What you are doing is examining.
Oh, that's the point. Hold on, Luke. Luke, you made a claim there. We have to stop. Why do you think we're on this show?
To make fun of atheists.
No. I am here asking for people to give me evidence of a God. I am open to the possibility that a God may exist, that somebody can call up and say, there's this new observation that was made. There's this new logical argument. There's all of this sort of stuff, right? That is why I do this. I don't get paid for this. I want to come on and say, hey, to date, there is no Nobel Prize for the invention or discovery of God. Otherwise, if people had figured that out in a manner to be definitive enough to justify all the shit we see going on in the world in the name of God, if people had proven it to that level, every university on earth would have a department of God studies. We don't live in that world. There's no way that you can say that we have proven, that people have definitively proven the amount of disagreement we have, the amount of strife we have, and the amount of just plain old illogic that we suffer from people who do believe in God for the wrong reasons demonstrates that nobody has been able to establish that there is a God. And that is why I don't believe. But I am here taking calls every week from people and have a lot of good conversations where people raise interesting points. And I am open to being convinced. Does that satisfy you?
So you claim that nobody has, the answer to your question is no. You claim that nobody has been able to demonstrate that God exists, but you have people who said that I have been convinced that God exists because of the demonstration that was presented to me. The evidence that you presented that do not convince you to are some people will claim that they were convinced because of those demonstrations that are not convincing to you. So that's why.
And some people have a very low epistemic bar, and that's fine. We do not. We want to believe as many true things as possible, and as few false things as possible. And that means that we have a higher epistemic bar. Because I'd just like to point out that in over 2,000 years of scientific discovery, not once have we found God to be the cause of anything, nor have we found any reason to assume that God has done anything. We have found naturalistic processes for things that 2,000 years ago were claimed to be supernatural in origin, and science has proved that is not the case. There is simply nothing to point to a God. Now,
to Luke's point, the people who claim to have become convinced, in my experience, and I'm sure your experience, Jim, disagree with each other in droves in the details that matter.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I forgot where I was going, but yeah, basically, and nobody, and none of the major Christian religions agree with each other. None of the major Islamic religions agree with each other on fundamental points. And so it doesn't seem like there's a single source for this God claim that can run consistent.
Yeah, the methodology that people are using to come up with an affirmation of these claims comes up with contradictory answers based on which culture the person comes from, which religion they were taught. All sorts of things seem to be more determinative of your religious beliefs rather than a system of determining belief. So how would you explain that, Luke? What should convince us that there is a God, and specifically, which God should we be convinced of?
So cross-examiner, the trouble I'm having here is that the reason why I say people has been convinced by the demonstration is the demonstration of a God, any God, but at least one. You are correct.
So demonstrate that
some gods are not.
Yeah, but do you agree that, let's just make it real simple. Let's say half the world believes in God A and half the world believes in God B. And God A says X is true and God B says X is false. Those people, and that is core to the belief system. If X is true, then God A is true. And if X is false, then God B is true. Half of those people are wrong, at least, right? Logically speaking. And this is just a hypothetical. I'm not trying to trap you. But can we agree on that?
Is X a state of affair?
I'm just, as part of the hypothetical, I'm just saying that the God A and God B have dynamically opposed claims about reality, that if they are proven to be wrong, that God does not exist. So if we have two groups of people agreeing on two different versions of a God that make contradictory claims about their own existence or about the universe, half of those people are wrong.
Correct. Some of them, for example, bacon. Bacon is one of the examples I often use. A group says bacon is good, the other says bacon is bad. So you have two gods, two claims about bacon, and one of those two is incorrect.
Okay, I thank you for that. That's a good example. It's not at the core of the belief. You could just be wrong about that one particular aspect, but we at least understand the concept that people have used a method to come to a belief about a claim, and they are wrong. And we see that a lot. And given the number of religions that make contradictory claims, if one of them is actually correct, they're probably in the minority. More people are wrong about their religion than the right religion is about itself. So what's wrong with this picture? If there were a God that you could discover through evidence, logic, reasoning, and all of that, shouldn't we have come to some consensus about it by now?
No.
Okay, why not?
Free will.
Trivial. So does it matter? I assume you believe in some sort of God?
Correct. I'm a Catholic. I'm sorry.
You're Catholic. What? Okay, yes. That's quite all right. So then I'm going to confirm this. You believe in an afterlife?
Correct.
Okay, so it's pretty high stakes for you.
What is pretty high stakes?
Your belief that if this God, your God, is true and your faith in him will be rewarded with an afterlife, if you're wrong, that's not a trivial belief. That's not a trivial error, correct?
Yes. What's the alternative?
The alternatives are some other God is right. You're only partially right, and there is no afterlife. You're partially right, but you should be doing evil. And if you don't do evil, you will be punished. Or there is no God. There's lots of alternatives. But they're all not trivial.
The alternative, maybe it's better for me to believe there is. The stake is not that high. If the alternative is nothing, like atheists propose, then no, the stake is not high.
For who?
For whom?
Wager?
For me.
For you. What about the rest of the world?
I don't understand your question.
We have people killing each other in the Middle East. We have parents in Idaho who are killing their children because of faith healing. We have people trying to control our government and force certain beliefs into our kids' heads, all in the name of a religion that, by your admitting, could be wrong, but you claim is trivial. I don't see these things as trivial. I think it's incredibly important.
It is important for them to have the correct religion, being Catholic. Yes.
But you can't prove that the Catholicism is the correct religion. So why should we become convinced?
Well, to be able to prove that Catholicism is the correct one, we need to have a common knowledge that we can build from, a common ground that we can build from to discern which religion is the correct one, how to discern between the true religion and the false religion. It's another conversation than the how can I be wrong question.
Let's have it, Jim.
Today.
Jim, ask him a question.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say that the free will cop-out for why there's evil in the world, and it is a cop-out. I mean, it's a nonsensical, because it basically and this is what's going to happen in this conversation.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jim. I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. Did he say free will? I thought he said trivial.
No, free will.
Oh, okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah. So this is what's going to happen in this conversation, Luke, is I'm going to argue for an omnipotent God, and you're not going to do that. I want to make that prediction right now. Because what I'm going to argue is that if your God was omnipotent, free will is not an issue. Because your God could figure out a way without violating free will to prevent evil. Because he's omnipotent and omniscient, and he's omnibenevolent, and he wants to. So you, by saying free will is the reason why there's evil in the world, is basically you're saying your God is not omnipotent.
This is frustrating. So, Jim, I was trying to agree with you before you went on the rest of the phrase. I said, yeah, the omnipotence that you presented is not the omnipotence of the real God. It's a faith.
Yeah, people have gone away.
You are
because,
not a Catholic.
Well, hold on. Because atheists like us have pointed out the problems with the omni God, modern religious philosophers have moved the goalposts and now call it a maximally powerful and maximally loving and maximally all of this stuff to get around this.
Right. But that doesn't fix the argument at all.
Well, it does, because then they can take that argument of can God create a burrito so hot that even he can't eat it, and explain away through shaking of hands that his maximal power doesn't exceed that.
Right. No, my argument is that even a maximally power God would still be able to prevent evil, because he's also maximally omniscient, or maximally omniscient, whatever you want to phrase that. Actually, let's just use the omnis, and there's no logical impossibilities, because that's basically what maximal does, right? And I'm saying that without logical impossibilities, that your God has a way to prevent evil without violating free will. Not the maximally God, no definition of that type of God, omni or maximal, I don't care which of those two you use, gets out of this, because you could only think of free will. And there's a billion other different ways that I can think of, if I spend enough time, that you could do it without ever violating free will. So you're arguing for a less than maximally powerful God or a less than omnipotent God. You are arguing for a God that I don't think you believe in.
What do you think about that, Luke?
I'm not sure. You claim that the maximally knowledgeable God wouldn't allow free will, or wouldn't allow suffering in the world. That's what you're saying, Jim, right?
The maximally benevolent, maximally knowledgeable, maximally powerful God does not exist because evil exists in the world. And your free will excuse is just that, as excuse, and you're arguing for a God that is not maximally powerful or maximally knowledgeable or maximally benevolent.
And we could also throw in, you haven't demonstrated that free will exists, but that's a whole other conversation.
I don't want to have that conversation.
So to break down Jim's argument, it's basically saying all versions of the God we've been presented would have the capability of creating and designing a universe where this evil would not happen, and it wouldn't violate any sort of rule he might have about free will. What's your response there, Luke? Okay, so where's the logical impossibility? What is God being restrained by then?
The claim that he would be able to do so has not to be demonstrated. Do we agree?
Okay. Yes, and we also have not demonstrated that this God is real either. We don't know on both of those questions.
Okay, so if your your claim is that maximally knowledgeable God cannot allow free will, then
no, that is not my claim.
No. We're responding to your claim that your claim to wrap up the shorthand of free will, as we understand it. Let's get this on the table. Is it goes something along the lines as follows: God doesn't want evil in the world, but God values free will above all else, and God knows it is impossible to give humans free will and prevent them from committing evil. Okay, that's the summary of it, right? That does away, that ignores a whole bunch of problems with this. Is there free will in heaven? What's your question there, Luke? Do you have free will in heaven?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you have free will on earth?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know how you differentiate. So if you don't have free will in heaven, then God values something more than free will. If you do have free will in heaven, and you also think that no evil exists in heaven, then there is a world God can create where you have free will and there is no evil. So no matter how you cut it, and again, this is why I talk about the models of God we have been presented with. The model of God I've been presented with when it comes to this free will argument is logically inconsistent with the concept of things like heaven. It's logically inconsistent with another common argument is if I gave people free will and I exposed myself to them to prove that I exist, they would not have free will because they could not help but worship me and believe, and they'd be like robots. Well, the story of Satan and all of his followers that defected from heaven seems to disagree with that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's mountains of problems with this whole free will thing. Do you see the problems with the whole free will argument? Do you see the inconsistency?
So you claim to know what will happen after we die. So what happens?
No, I do not. No, I do not.
No, we've never
I am
made that
taking this
claim.
from the Catholic belief system that you said you believe in, that there is some sort of afterlife, which you confirmed, that I assume you believe that there is some sort of heaven. I think you affirmed that. And the description I've always been given by all believers is that there is no evil in heaven, and some waffle like you as to whether or not you have free will in heaven. Do you disagree with any of that?
The last one I disagree with.
You waffled. You said you don't know whether there's free will.
Oh, sorry. What does it mean, waffle?
To waffle. I'm sorry. To waffle means to be like undecided, go back and forth. I'm not sure. Maybe yes, maybe no. That's waffling. Sorry. To be unsure of and maybe change your mind frequently on. So basically, they don't know whether or not there's free will in heaven. Some say yes, some say no.
Yeah. So the reason why I don't know if there is free will in heaven is because the absence of time. And for me, for my understanding of free will, time is necessary.
So nothing. You don't think there's time in heaven?
Correct. That's a
okay. So nothing ever changes. It's just in a single state.
It's a belief of the Catholic Church. Time is not. There is no time as we know it in heaven. Maybe there is a sequence of events, but no time.
Hey, Jim, that sounds like something like an excuse that a priest would give somebody to get away from this question, doesn't it?
Well, as a recovering Catholic, I have a problem with what he's saying as a belief of Catholicism, and I'm double checking myself as we go. And I've read the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and that's not in there, but that's not a surprise. So, no, I'm not saying, I don't know where you get this idea from. I mean, God is outside of time, certainly. And we may experience time differently. But yeah, if there is no time, we don't even know what that means in terms of science. Certainly, timeless and spaceless would mean doesn't exist within this universe. So
okay.
Yeah, I don't know where you get that as a Catholic.
I hadn't heard it, but that's putting it back onto Luke. Okay, so but you agree you don't know whether there's free will in heaven.
So yeah, the reason you understand why I say.
Do you? Right? Yeah, I get it. I'm going to sort of skip over that. I think the concept of being outside of time is a nonsense that we can't comprehend and is meaningless BS, quite frankly, that people give to try to sort of wave away problems with their logic. But let's just at least ask this. There either is or is not free will in heaven. Those are the only two possibilities. Free will exists or it does not exist. Is that true?
Words are to convey idea. The idea conveyed by free will doesn't exist in heaven. That would be the answer. So what you understand,
God doesn't value free will.
Free will right now, the idea of free will that I try to convey is using time. Since there is no time in heaven, then there is no free will in heaven the way we perceive it today.
And heaven is going to be a forever concept, much bigger, longer, more than our time on earth, right?
Forever implied the use of time. Again, it's a placeholder, right?
Permanent or whatever you want to say. But my point is the Bible tends to teach that the earth is sort of like a doormat that we wipe our feet on before we go to heaven, and heaven's the important part, that this is a test or that this is whatever. So if God doesn't value free will enough to have it exist in heaven, why does he value it so much here to the point that he thinks that he should put it in, even though it prevents him logically somehow from preventing evil?
The choice of God has to be free. That's why.
It's just restating the question. I'm asking why does God value it so much in here, but not in heaven? Like your continued choice in heaven should be free, right? Your continued participation. If you grow tired of heaven and you want it to end, should you be able to end it?
Tiring implies the use of time again. So okay. What the trouble is we are having here, cross-examining, is the way you ask your question imply time in heaven. Right?
Yes, and as I said, I think a timelessness is a nonsense comment. It's a nonsense concept. It doesn't make any sense. If there is no time, then states of things don't change. I don't perceive anything. God wouldn't perceive anything. If we are talking about time, right? Change in states over time. From one frame to the next, something has changed. If nothing ever changes, then there's actually no observation, there's no emotions, there's no belief, because you can't think and be self-referential. It's meaningless to say God is outside of time. You might as well say God is true and false at the same time. It just doesn't make any sense. We can't comprehend it. Does it make any sense to you, Jim?
No. I mean, we wandered kind of far off from the problem of evil that kind of disproves that his God exists. But yeah, to say that it's without time, I mean, you're getting into a realm that we just have no idea what the heck is going on with that concept. We know that space and time came into existence at the same time. I was reading, or at the same moment. We don't even know if words like before time make any sense, because that before indicates that time exists of some kind. It just may be that it is a different way to experience time or a different way to experience events. You're basically just spouting nonsense about heaven, and you're spouting nonsense about heaven that you can't prove. And I don't care at that point, because you can't prove that heaven exists. You haven't proven your God exists. You haven't even given it, nothing you said has come with any kind of proof. And we've been talking to you for almost 30 minutes now. And
let's give him a chance, shall we? What convinced you that not only a God exists, but it's the Catholic version?
Oh, wow. The existence of God came with the prime mover argument, but the Catholic Church interpretation of God came with stories like Bacon and the ability to have more than one wife. And depending on each religion, they have their own claim about what is good or bad. And their mistake, they are evidently mistaken about their claim.
Okay, so to summarize that into shorthand, you judged the different laws and rules and claims, and you found that you agree with the Catholic claims more than other religions. Is that a fair summary?
It's not a judge, it's an observation.
An observation that led you to the conclusion that something's right or wrong, which is judging something, right?
Yeah, you have criteria of good and bad things depending on each religion, right? Each religion
Right.
would tell you.
You said Bacon, right? That people who are arguing over Bacon, that's something that convinced you the Catholic Church was right in some way.
For example, yeah, bacon is one of those things where they claim that if you eat bacon, you will get sick. Sickness is the consequence of bad.
So, but you started with the prime mover and you're at the Catholic God. How do you get from, we'll assume for the moment that the prime mover argument doesn't have serious flaws in it. How do you get from the prime mover to the Catholic version of the Christian God?
Yeah, so you have a God, so that's a contribution from the prime mover.
No, you don't have a God. You have a prime mover. You have a prime mover. You're claiming it's God. I want to know how you get there.
Yeah, it could be Bart Simpson in his lab creating a universe out of a computer program. We don't know, but it's a prime mover.
Bart Simpson has a beginning.
You know what I'm saying? Prime mover, right? Prime mover for our local presentation of the universe, right?
For me, from my understanding from the prime mover, he doesn't have a beginning. Like it's the unmoved mover.
Right. Not a problem. Not a problem with that. How do you get from prime mover to a God, to the Catholic God in particular?
Or to an agent at all, to a thinking being. That's what our point is any question about what is the cause of everything, the prime mover is, we don't know. It's just an assertion that there was an original cause. That's it. Not that it's an agent, not that it's a God. It's just some cause. That's the prime mover. You go from there all the way to virgin birth, right? And heaven and all of these other claims. How do you get there?
All right. So you have many steps. I agree with you, but one of those steps we talked about was Bacon. Another step that you can use is the argument that this God has to interact with the Word. To have this kind of knowledge, you need revelation.
Right, but these are all claims that you're making, but you're not supporting any of your claims with either logical argument or evidence, right? And that's what we're looking for is a logical argument. We're assuming that the prime mover argument is true. So we're giving you that as a starting point. And then you said Bacon somehow is a step on the way. I don't see how Bacon is on there. And then that the God has to interact with the universe. Okay, that would be the prime mover thing. So you just restated the prime mover argument. You haven't said anything yet. So how do you get from the prime mover to the Catholic God?
I understand. So what's happening right now is I don't know what you consider evidence. That's the reason why I called you the first time around when I asked you what would convince you or how can you be proven wrong. I was asking you what do you consider good evidence or evidence for God. Since I don't have that, there is nothing that I can bring you that will answer your question.
No, I understand that. Our question is, first, what convinced you, which I think you're trying to tell us. And then two is, after we have a conversation and point out potential flaws, do you still think that that's a good reason to become convinced? Would you use the same logic when picking which Wall Street investment firm to put your life savings in? Would you do the same thing when determining whether it's safe to go down a dark alley with somebody at a night? Like, are you using the same methodology? And many times, if not all times, when we have that conversation, I find that people who are as thoughtful as you are tend to use fuzzier logic and looser rules when they want to believe in a God. I'm not saying you want to, you've concluded that you are, but they don't apply the same skepticism. They don't have the same demands for evidence and logic and reasoning that Jim's talking about that they do in every other aspect in life where shit really matters. Where do I put my money? Am I going to be safe? How should I raise my children? Should I get this vaccine or not? Right? There's lots of ways that people make mistakes. How could you be mistaken in your belief of God? And why should we believe you when there's a whole bunch of people out here telling us essentially the opposite is true, that we shouldn't believe in the Catholic God? That's what we're getting on. Go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say to answer your question, what is evidence? I just use the dictionary definition for a whole lot of stuff, and the dictionary definition of evidence is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. So, what are the facts or information that you use to go from a prime mover to the Catholic God? What are the facts?
All right, Jim. So when I said consider evidence, what would you consider evidence? I am not asking in general evidence. I'm just asking for the specific case of the Catholic God, which is a little
bit. And that's what I'm asking you for. What are the facts that the prime mover is the Catholic God?
Like I said, there are many things that are between those two steps. One of them.
What's the biggest one? We don't have a lot of time. I'm sorry, Luke, but what's the biggest thing? The biggest reason you believe in the Catholic God? Number one, if you had to say this is the prime one.
About the Catholic God, it's the amount of truth claim about the statement of the word. That's the biggest reason why.
Okay, so you know when the Catholic Church apologized for prosecuting Galileo?
Okay.
It was the year the Hubble telescope was launched. So I don't want to really go on into it, but I don't think you can be a member of the Catholic Church and say that the church itself makes truth claims. Let's ignore the hiding and raping of children and all that. And I know you're going to say those are people and all that stuff, but those people are theoretically receiving truth better than anybody else on the planet, and they're not. So Jim, we got to move on to other callers. Do you have anything you wanted to wrap up with?
No, I would really look at those truth claims because, like I said, I'm a recovering Catholic, and they fall apart very, very quickly when you go and you look at history and you go look at things that actually happened. The basic claim going back to the Bible is problematic. The New Testament is problematic when you go and actually study it. And I don't mean read it to study it. I mean go and look at what was happening at the time. Go look at all the things that were influenced by it, or that influenced it. And just start with the basics. Can you prove it was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that wrote those Gospels? Because you can't.
Hint, no.
Yeah, I would start with something as fundamental as that, and then go and try and prove those things, and go really examine those. Because once you do, you won't be a Catholic for much longer.
I want to thank you, Luke, for your time. I really did appreciate the call. I think you're an excellent conversation to participate with, and I'd love for you to call back again. But we do have to move on. So thank you very much for your time. And we will hopefully hear from Luke again.